This is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, a podcast and radio program presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. Most any contemporary musical style can trace its roots back to the blues. Time Signatures explores the blues and its musical connections with captivating interviews, lively discussions, and news from the world of the blues.
You know I'm crying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
And now, here he is, your host, Jim Ervin.
Baby, I'm home.
Yes, I am home. Thank you so much, Parker. Appreciate that. And welcome to Time Signatures. My next guest on the show today got his first taste of the blues in the early 90s in the muddy potato fields of Idaho. His buddy Tom Moore introduced him to the Junior Wells and Buddy Guy classic Hoodoo Man Blues. Following that moment, he and his friend formed a band which is still regarded as legendary in the Boise region, known as Fat John and the Three Slims. It wasn't long before our guest began recording and releasing his own music, and the rest, as they say, is history. History, I might add, that we will discuss in length. John Németh, welcome to Time Signatures.
Good to be on the show, man. Thanks for having me.
We are really glad to have you. And, you know, there's so many layers to this onion that the best way to start is just we're going to begin on the outside and kind of work our way in. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, man.
Okay, great. Now, I would love to hear the story of how your friend Tom let you hear Hoodoo Man Blues that very first time. Talk about that, because prior to that moment, you were actually more interested in the hip hop and rock scene, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. He was taking some lessons from a guitar player in town, and the guitar player gave him this record.
Mm-hmm.
It was on a mixtape, actually. It was, or just not a mixtape, but a bootleg cassette tape.
Okay, a little compilation like?
No, I'm sorry, it wasn't a compilation. It was the whole album of Hoodoo Man Blues.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I took it back home, and I used to listen to music in the basement of the house because my dad really hated rock and roll and blues and jazz. I mean, with a passion.
Okay.
And so I'd listen to it in the basement. So I remember like taking that record downstairs and putting it on the headphones, having a swig of moonshine. And because I had a still in my house growing up.
Oh, wow.
That's my kind of family.
Right.
And I had a still in the basement of the house. So I had a swig of moonshine and put that record on. And, oh, man, it just resonated with me. I don't know. Everything about the album just captivated me. I was trying to figure out, what are these songs about?
Mm-hmm.
Snatch it back and hold it. Baby, one more time. I ain't doing too bad, baby. I got you on my mind. That was the first song on the record, was Snatch It Back and Hold It.
Mm-hmm.
What in the world is he talking about? Great imagery of tunes. The next song was like a Ships on the Ocean, a song about, a love that feels like it's lost at sea. In Hoodoo Man Blues, somebody done tried to hoodoo the Hoodoo Man. That was a wild tune to think about, the Hoodoo Man getting hoodooed.
Oh, yeah.
And Chitlins Con Carne was on there. And Junior Wells harmonica playing. I mean, man, he was one of the baddest dudes that ever lived, and rarely copied, because he's just too damn cool. It's really hard to copy his cool. He's that cool. And he played Chitlins Con Carne on that album, and that really blew my mind. He's also playing harmonica with like just his rhythm, and his groove was just so soulful and captivating. And it was a small band. It was guitar, which the guitar player was Buddy Guy. And then this bass player named Jack Myers on the album. that guy's a very progressive blues bass player. So the music was very progressive, and the drummer was like a jazz player that could play with like Ray Charles. Is great
Okay.
at like boogaloo and things like that.
Yep.
Funky. There's a song on there, "Good Morning, Little Schoolgirl." Of course, man, I'm like 15 years old, hearing this stuff. I'm like, good morning. Oh yeah, man.
Right.
So there's all these tunes that really resonated with me, and I didn't play harmonica at that time. But I loved harmonica, and I loved Junior Wells singing because he reminded me a lot of one of my favorite singers, Louis Armstrong.
Oh yeah.
I really bonded with him and got into the mood of the album and the freedom in the music. It just sounded like these guys were getting together in the middle of the night, drinking moonshine or some kind of liquor and making a record. And come to find out, that's exactly what they were doing. I guess that record was recorded in the middle of the night in Chicago. They'd already done a gig. They went to the studio and they cut the album. So they had already been feeling good. They already had some drinks and they were already warmed up, ready to go. And they cut it like a jazz record. They cut it live, and they cut it all in a night, and that's the album. Now,
that begs the question, how do you know that story? Did you talk to Buddy Guy about it, or where did you hear the information?
I can't remember who told me all this information.
Okay.
But I do know Buddy, and I do know Bob Kester from Delmark, God rest his soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know Elvin Bishop, who used to work with Junior Wells. And I've talked about that album with many different people, so I don't know who gave me that information, but yeah, that's what I heard.
Just kind of cool to know the backstory of it. Well, John, I would have to turn back just a little bit here and step back to a little more of the beginning. Talk about your earliest musical influence. Who are they? Who were they? And how did they help you shaping your musical journey as you grew?
My parents and my brother and sister really, and my godmother. My godmother, she would come over to the house every day. She was my mom's best friend. She was a concert pianist that, man, she got stage fright.
Oh, wow.
And she graduated from Sherwood Music School in Chicago with a degree as a concert pianist. And she got her show all ready to go, and she was ready to go out and travel and perform, and she got stage fright and she couldn't do it.
Wow.
But like, get this, like once a year, when my mom had like decided to invite too many people over to her house for dinner, like on a holiday, my mom was freaking out, trying to get the place clean, get all the food cooked. My godmother would help her out, to get everything ready. She would get behind the piano and at the house, and she would perform a concert.
Wow.
And so she'd play for a couple hours straight. And her emotional sense and attachment to the melody was greatness. And so once a year, from the time I was a baby till I was probably 18 years old, I would get a show once a year from her. And that blew my mind. And the way she would, it's like out of nowhere, not even read music.
Yeah.
Just sit down at the piano and take off.
Absolutely. That's so cool to hear that story.
Yeah. So it was my godmother. And then my mom used to love all the crooners.
Okay.
She listened to the crooners. She was a big Doris Day fan, a fan of Bing Crosby. And so those were her two big favorites. And she had watched the Lawrence Welk show. I'd watch that, so I'd get into the joy and happiness and champagne bubbles of that.
Oh, yeah.
Then there was my father, who he listened to Hungarian music.
Oh, my.
traditional Hungarian music, and that music has been ripped off probably more than any other music in the world. Melodies, famous melodies have been taken from that music, and it's very harmonically jazz forward. So he didn't like American jazz music or blues, but what he liked was European, like Hungarian jazz, basically. So he would listen to that, and every morning he'd wake up and he'd put that music on. And some of the stuff is breakneck speed, like Charlie Parker kind of stuff.
Okay.
And he would put that music on. He'd do his calisthenics every morning.
Wow.
For minutes to that music. So every morning I'd get a dose of that, like at 6:30 in the morning, seeping into my brain through osmosis.
So you had a really wide variety of music that you were impacted by growing up. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then my brother, he loved like outlaw country music and 70s rock. He was 14 years older than me, and so he was in high school in the 70s when I was born. So he listened to like Johnny Paycheck and Waylon Jennings
Sure.
and Aerosmith and the Rolling Stones and all that. And then my sister, she liked all the Broadway music and like Broadway rock, like, like Grease, Olivia Newton-John,
Sure.
ABBA. So yeah, I got everything from everywhere. It was cool, and it definitely changed me and made me a big music fan.
You are listening to Time Signatures with Jim Ervin. I am pleased to have John Németh here not in the studio with me, but he's here with me, being recorded at my home out here in Mason, Michigan. Why? Because I can record just about anywhere I want, which is kind of fun. But we have got a lot to get to here. John, you released Jack of Harps in 2002. You actually had Come and Get It in 2004, featuring Junior Watson. And you then took off for San Francisco, where you connected with Anson Funderburgh and the Rockets. And I'd like you to talk about that period of your young career, and how did the stint in California influence your music as you grew?
It was really great moving to California because there were so many musicians dedicated to the art of performing blues.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I moved down there, I was working with so many different artists. There were all these guitar players that needed singers. So I worked with Kid Anderson. I worked with Mighty Mike Shermer. I worked with Anthony Paul, Kenny Blue Ray, and Elvin Bishop.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with these cats, and the word about me was just, I guess, taken off around the country. I was not really aware of who was, familiar with me or not. And I got a call from Anson Funderburgh to fill in for Sam Myers,
Okay.
a Mississippi legendary blues man that fronted the band. I jumped at that opportunity, so I went to Dallas, Texas, and learned all of Sam's tunes, about 30 of the songs.
Wow.
Got together with the band, and we went down through the South and toured. Some of the greatest gigs I've ever done were those gigs, especially the one at the Delta Blues Festival in Greenville, Mississippi. It was just great. I mean, the audience, blues is their religion, blues is their language. The crowd interaction with the music, every line I would say would get a reaction out of the audience. So it was really great. I'll never forget it. Changed the way I sang the blues.
I have to ask you, because you and I spoke about this before we began recording this evening. The blues in the United States versus the blues across the pond in Europe is a totally different animal, isn't it?
I would say over in Europe, there's probably a lot more respect for the music
Mm-hmm.
because it's not native to the area, and it's really cool. The gig opportunities are fantastic over there, and the crowds are a lot bigger for the shows than here in the U.S. But the U.S. has been very good to me, maybe better than a lot of other artists. And I think part of that is because I'm a singer and a songwriter,
Right.
and I'm someone that, communicates the music, and I'm keeping it fresh. So here in the States, people, I do well in the States too. But I think for a lot of the older artists performing a lot of the older blues, they do well over there in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And Europe just loves just guitar rock blues, man. They just eat that up like it's going out of business, man. They just love it. They probably love that more than the songwriting itself.
Well, I was sitting here looking at my notes because it's been said that you have the uncanny ability to skillfully blend retro and modern blues and soul into compelling music that is simultaneously old and new. And just listening to you share the stories about your blues journey really bears that out. I think that it's kind of cool because there are people who are blues purists who just want the old traditional blues. And then there's the people that like to do the fusion with the soul and different things, a little funk, a little rock, different things like that. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
I love to interpret Black music. So I draw from so much of the blues of all the decades. I love soul music.
Right.
Percy Sledge and a blues singer named Magic Sam were actually my introduction to singing soul music.
Okay.
And I think, combining those styles makes me more palatable to a bigger audience. Although I would love to try to do just straight up blues show. I don't know if it would sell the tickets. Even Buddy Guy, he's doing Jimi Hendrix and John Hyatt and
yes, he is.
And everything under the sun, and the moment he started doing all that music was the moment that he became the guy that's making $100,000 a show.
Yeah.
So I think, as time moves on, musical tastes, start to differ. And especially since there's really no blues on the radio, especially commercial radio, you have to familiarize yourself as an artist with the needs and desires of the audiences.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the artists today they're becoming better attuned at reading the audience, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot more of that fusion. Joe Bonamassa comes to mind. Even the younger artists like Toby Lee, who's coming up. He's 18 years old, and he does some incredible blues stuff. And then Matthias Latine, who just won the IBC this year down in Memphis. I mean, it seems like there's definitely some growth. There's some it's reemergence, I guess, of blues with some various twists to it. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of new talent in the blues. There was very, very, very few people into blues when I was getting into it. I mean, trying to find other musicians that played blues in the 90s was pretty rare.
Mm-hmm.
Stevie Ray Vaughan being so popular.
Yep.
There were a lot of kids that tried to emulate Stevie Ray Vaughan, but there weren't a bunch of drummers or bass players, piano players, or people playing the other instruments. I think with YouTube and streaming has really opened the door for a lot of young talent to discover new music And of course, and then they incorporate the music that they were raised in.
Sure.
And some kids are raised in blues, modern blues these days. Like here in Memphis, we have a blues station here, WDIA, which has been around ever since B.B. King was just was a little tiny tot, and they're still playing blues. We had the Tri-State Blues Festival a week ago down here, and I was performing somewhere else, and that's a huge blues festival. There's probably 5,000 or 6,000 people at the venue, and the modern blues music has a lot more soul in it than the soul genre in it. But yeah, there's talent everywhere. They're coming up through the ranks. I just wish there was more avenues for success for those guys. You know, a lot of those guys like Matthias Lepine and
Sure.
those guys, you know, they don't have the money like Joe Bonamassa has to make themselves a star.
That's fact. Yep.
But guys like Gary Clark, you know, that's a really talented cat who, you know, that came up through Austin and the great Austin music scene there. And he's done really great with his music. He might be, although maybe the boomer audience doesn't like to consider him a blues artist, but I would consider him probably the biggest next to Buddy Guy.
Well, John, it has been an honor. I think I'm going to have you hang around for another take on this. But real quick, do me a favor and let us know where we can find more information on you. Where can we get your music and your goodies and book you for a show?
Well, you can go to johnnemeth.com and JohnNemeth.com. And if you want to book me, you can find information there to contact my booking agent and my publicist and everybody like that, and get whatever you need.
Sounds good. John, we want to thank you very much for being on Time Signatures. That's going to wrap it up for this edition. We want to thank everybody for tuning in and helping us keep the blues alive. We will see you on the next round.
This has been Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. For more information on cabs, visit capitalareablues.org. You can find this episode and past episodes at lccconnect.org. The Time Signatures theme song, Michigan Roads, is used by permission and was written by Root Doctor, featuring Freddie Cunningham.
You know I'm trying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
Until next time, keep on keeping the blues alive.